So, you've decided to become a medieval executioner. Congratulations! You've just signed up for the only job in history where your success rate and your social life are in direct opposition. You're the necessary evil, the unwanted essential worker of the 14th century, and the only employee nobody wants to shake hands with after a job well done. Forget knights, forget glory, forget the stories of noble battles and chivalry. You're the reason justice gets to pretend it's civilized. You don't ride into battle. You clean up the mess after everyone else is done sinning. You don't wield a sword for honor. You swing an axe for obligation. Still, on the bright side, there's job security. Crime never goes out of style, and medieval Europe is basically a 24-hour buffet of moral failure. Someone steals a loaf of bread, you're working overtime. Someone insults a noble, that's hazard pay, assuming they remember to pay you. Before we start, though, go ahead and subscribe. Seriously, because by the time we're done here, you'll never complain about your boss again, or your hours, or even your commute. This job makes every other occupation in the Middle Ages look like a spa day. Now grab your axe, lace up your muddy boots, and take a deep breath. Through your mouth, preferably, because this morning, you're not just waking up in the Middle Ages. You're waking up as the person the rest of the village pretends doesn't exist until they need you. Welcome to the world's most thankless job. Welcome to another day in the life of the medieval executioner.
Morning doesn't exactly arrive in your little corner of the village. It seeps in, a thin, gray sort of light that feels less like a sunrise and more like an afterthought. The kind of light that seeps between crooked shutters and reminds you that you've survived another night you weren't entirely sure you wanted to. You wake up the way you always do. Stiff neck, sore hands, and a faint smell of smoke that isn't really gone, just hiding somewhere in the rafters. Your bed, if that's what you want to call a sack of hay stuffed with mystery and regret, crunches faintly when you move. Somewhere inside it, something alive shifts, but you decide to ignore that. The air is cold enough to bite, but not cold enough to kill, which, depending on your mood, is almost disappointing. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, your bare feet finding the chill of the packed dirt floor, a floor that never really gets clean, just temporarily rearranged. You sit there for a moment, listening to the silence. There's no bird song this early. Even the crows have better things to do. All you hear is the slow creak of wood and the faint drip of last night's rain sneaking in through the roof, and somewhere under it all, a kind of stillness that feels heavy, watchful. Outside, the world is already pretending to be busy. A cartwheel squeaks, a rooster shouts. Somewhere, someone's dog is barking like it's trying to convince itself life has purpose. But here, in this cramped, crooked house on the edge of the village, the day begins differently. You don't rush to greet the sun, you wait for it to forget you. There's a basin of water in the corner, or rather, there's what used to be water before dust and despair claimed it. You splash your face and it's like being slapped by history itself. Cold, metallic, faintly suspicious. The water here has seen things. You rub your hands together and glance at your tools in the corner. The axe, the rope, the heavy leather apron hanging like a condemned man's shadow. Even when you're not working, they stare at you. You wonder if anyone ever truly gets used to waking up next to an axe. You glance around your one-room kingdom. The table is uneven, the stool has 3.5 legs, and your shoes are arguing with gravity. A loaf of yesterday's bread sits on the table, now the texture of a small boulder. You'll get to that later, after you remember why you're still doing this. No one chooses to be the executioner. You didn't, at least. You inherited it, the way some people inherit land or money or family curses. Your father did the job before you, and his father before him. Not because they wanted to, because someone had to.
And here you are, centuries before alarm clocks, already awake before dawn, haunted by your own reputation. You're the village's walking contradiction, necessary but unwanted. Everyone wants justice, but no one wants to see the hands that deliver it. When you step outside, the morning air feels heavier than it should. The mist clings to the thatch roofs like guilt. The cobblestones shine wet and uneven, and the smell of smoke, manure, and cold bread greets you like an old friend with bad news. A few villagers are already stirring, a baker hauling firewood, a woman drawing water from the well, a shepherd calling to his dog. They see you, and you see them, but they don't wave, they don't smile. They just notice, and then they look away, quickly, as if staring too long might summon something. It's not hostility, not really. It's discomfort, superstition, maybe even fear. You're the person who deals with endings. In a world where everyone's terrified of sin and death, you're both the warning and the punishment. The baker's wife pulls her child a little closer as you pass. The child doesn't understand yet. Not really. They just know the grown-ups get quiet when you walk by. The silence follows you like a second shadow. You try not to take it personally. It's not that they hate you, it's that they can't look at you without remembering what you do and what you remind them of. The thin line between them and the scaffold, between life and whatever waits after. You keep walking, boots sinking into the mud, breath fogging in the cold. The village smells of smoke and damp straw, and the faint sweetness of something rotting nearby. Somewhere, a bell rings from the church tower, low, lazy, and not for you. Your house sits just outside the village proper, always on the edge, close enough to be called part of it, far enough to be forgotten when convenient. They say it's to keep the peace, to separate the hand of justice from polite society. You suspect it's because no one wants to smell your laundry drying. You pull your cloak tighter. The morning's barely begun, and already it feels heavier than the axe waiting in the corner. The day ahead promises work, and work means stares, whispers, and the sort of memories that cling like soot. The sky brightens reluctantly. The world wakes up for another day of barter, gossip, and survival. And you just try to exist quietly, without anyone noticing too much. Because in this town, being forgotten is the closest thing to kindness you're ever going to get. Breakfast is supposed to be the most important meal of the day. In your case, it's more of a daily negotiation with despair. On the table sits a heel of bread that has achieved the structural integrity of masonry. You tap it with your knife, and it echoes like a tombstone. A smear of something that once dreamed of being cheese lurks nearby, sweating faintly in the chill. You break a piece off, taste it, and decide that hunger is still the lesser evil. The ale jug waits beside it, cloudy and sour, but it's safer than water. That's one of the great medieval jokes. Water kills faster than work. You take a swallow that tastes like yesterday's sins, and try not to breathe through your nose. This is your routine. Wake, wash, remind yourself you exist, and then sit down to chew through a meal that feels like penance. No servants, no family chatter, no smell of roast meat from a lord's kitchen, just the creak of the stool, and the slow realization that you've been staring at the same crack in the wall for 5 years. You tell yourself you should be grateful. Some people start their day with nothing at all. Others start it at the end of a rope. Perspective is important.
or so the priest keeps saying. He has a warm house and steady meals. You have a job that makes people cross themselves when you walk by. The bread finally yields, scraping the roof of your mouth. The cheese bites back with an enthusiasm that borders on personal. You wash it down with another gulp of ale and try to ignore the faint film it leaves behind. Somewhere between sip and swallow, you start thinking about the condemned you'll meet later today. You always do, even when you tell yourself you won't. You wonder what they had for breakfast. Maybe nothing. Maybe they're already sitting in a cold cell, staring at their own wall, wishing they were anywhere else. It's a strange connection. Both of you awake before dawn, both of you waiting for the same hour to arrive, just for very different reasons. You pull the knife from the loaf again, cleaning the blade with the hem of your tunic. It's not the good knife. You don't bring that one to breakfast. The good blade stays sharp and hidden, wrapped in cloth, waiting for official duties. This one's dull, nicked, and safe. You like that about it. In the corner, a rat rustles in the grain sack. You don't bother chasing it. Everyone has to eat, even vermin. At least it doesn't flinch when it looks at you. Outside, a rooster crows as if trying to impress the heavens. You take it as your signal to finish eating. You're not hungry, but you make yourself swallow the last mouthful. Hunger isn't the issue. Habit is. Routine keeps you sane, or close enough to pass inspection. You wipe your hands on your apron, then reconsider and wipe them on your trousers instead. The apron deserves better. It's one of the few things in your possession that might still be called professional. Heavy leather, cracked and scarred. It hangs by the door like an accusation. You'll need it soon enough. Breakfast is done. You've survived another meal and another morning without thinking too much. That's the real trick of this job. Not sharpening the blade or tying the knots, but keeping your thoughts dull enough to get through the day. Too sharp, and they cut deeper than steel ever could. You push the stool back, stretch the ache out of your shoulders, and look around the dim little room one more time. Everything here smells faintly of smoke and iron. You wonder if the smell ever really leaves, or if it's settled into your skin for good. You suspect the latter. Before stepping outside, you take another swallow of ale straight from the jug. It burns a little on the way down, warming the emptiness where comfort ought to be. Then you set it aside, reach for the whetstone on the shelf, and turn toward the tools that define your existence. The morning light is stronger now, creeping through the window and striking the metal edge of the axe. It glints dully, more shadow than shine. You stare at it, and for a moment you see your reflection. A face pale from lack of sun, eyes ringed by too many sleepless nights, and that strange fate calm that people mistake for cruelty. It's time to get to work.
There's a strange comfort in preparation. Long before the town stirs, before the church bell calls the faithful, or the baker slides his first loaf into the oven, you're already at work, sharpening, checking, mending. It's quieter now, and quiet is the one luxury your profession allows. The axe sits on the table, heavy and familiar. The blade is nicked near the edge where it bit too deep last week. You touch the metal and it's cold, almost alive, like it remembers everything it's ever done. It doesn't judge you, it doesn't forgive you either. It just waits to be used again. You pull the whetstone from your pouch and start working the edge. Slow, rhythmic strokes, metal against stone, spark against silence. Each pass shaves away a little dullness, and for a moment you almost feel like a craftsman instead of a public spectacle. The motion is steady, meditative, hypnotic.
This is the part no one sees, the unseen half of justice, the quiet before the crowd, before the noise, before the look in someone's eyes right before the end. You learned this ritual from your father, who learned it from his. He used to say, "A sharp blade makes for a short prayer." You didn't understand it when you were a boy, and now you wish you didn't. There's truth in it, but the kind that stings. Beside the axe lies a coil of rope. You run it through your fingers, checking for frays. Each strand smells faintly of smoke and sweat. You know its weight by heart, how it stiffens in the cold, how it stretches when it shouldn't. Ropes are like people. They look fine until the wrong kind of pressure tests them. You have spares, of course. Always spares. Nothing invites disaster faster than overconfidence. You've seen it happen before. A knot tied too loosely, a rope worn thin, a beam that creaks one time too many. And when things go wrong, it's not the sheriff who takes the blame, or the priest, or the mayor. It's you, the man with the axe, the face the crowd remembers for all the wrong reasons. There's a bucket of sawdust under the table. You dip your hand into it, stir it absently. It's for later, to soak up what mustn't be left behind. You try not to think about that. Sawdust smells like pine and denial. Next comes the apron, your armor, such as it is. Thick leather, patched at the seams, stiff from years of use. You pick it up and hold it for a moment. It's heavier than you remember, as if it's absorbed every secret the town would rather forget. The stains never really wash out. They just darken, blend together until the whole thing looks like the color of regret. You tie it around your waist, the straps pulling tight across your chest. The leather creaks softly, like it's sighing. You feel the familiar weight settle in, pressing against your ribs. You could almost convince yourself it's protection. It isn't. It's a reminder. On the shelf above the table sits a small tin of oil for the blade. You dip a rag into it and wipe the metal until it gleams. Not bright, but honest. This is your ritual of control, the one part of the job you can still shape with your hands. You can't stop what's coming, but you can make sure it's done cleanly, precisely. It's the closest thing to mercy you're allowed. Your tools are simple: axe, rope, stone, apron, and a quiet prayer for steadiness. Nothing ornate, nothing noble, just the instruments of obligation. You arrange them carefully in your satchel, the same order every time, because order is all that stands between you and chaos. For a brief moment, you imagine another life, one where the same hands mend plows or build carts, where the sharp edge cuts wood instead of flesh. You picture a workshop that smells of sawdust and varnish instead of blood. The thought lingers just long enough to hurt. You shake it off, finish coiling the rope, and test the blade one last time with your thumb. The edge whispers against your skin, sharp and ready. Good enough, it has to be. Outside, the light has grown stronger. The mist is starting to lift from the fields, and the first real sounds of the village reach your door. Chatter, laughter, the clatter of buckets and hooves. They're living their lives. You're preparing to end someone's. You pull on your cloak, heft the satchel over your shoulder, and glance back at the little room you call home. The bed, the basin, the dying fire, none of it matters now. You close the door behind you and start down the narrow path toward the heart of the village. The air smells of damp earth and smoke. Your boots sink into the mud. The day has begun, and so has the weight of it.
The path into town isn't long, but it always feels longer than it should. A narrow track of mud and gravel winds between the fields, slick with morning dew and the residue of yesterday's rain. It's quiet now, that fragile kind of quiet where even the birds sound cautious. You've made this walk 1,000 times, but it never feels routine. Every step toward the square is a slow negotiation between anonymity and exposure. The village lies just ahead. Clustered rooftops, thin smoke rising from chimneys, the bell tower cutting a crooked silhouette against a pale sky. Beautiful, in a way. If only it didn't look so much like judgment wearing a thatched roof. The first few villagers you pass try not to notice you. They succeed for about half a second, then glance up, quick, nervous, reflexive. You nod politely. They pretend not to see. A woman carrying a basket of laundry crosses to the other side of the path without missing a step. A pair of boys hauling water from the well suddenly find something fascinating to argue about in the opposite direction. An old man, the blacksmith, gives a curt nod but keeps his eyes on the ground. They're not rude, just careful. Superstition and civility live side by side here like rats and bread. You can't blame them. To them, you're not just a man, you're a profession, a necessary blemish. You carry the memory of every scaffold, every cry, every whisper of a life ended in justice. In a world that fears sin more than suffering, you are the sin people can point at. As you walk through the muddy lane, you pass the church. The priest stands at the door, chatting with a few parishioners. He sees you and gives you that small, cautious nod, the one that says, "I see you doing your duty," and also, "Let's not talk about it too long." You nod back. Neither of you means offense. Neither of you wants to linger. You used to wonder whether men of God pray for you. You've stopped wondering. If they do, it's probably for your soul. If they don't, it's because they'd rather not think about where your work ends and theirs begins. Further down the lane, the butcher's apprentice pauses outside the shop, wiping his hands on his apron. He looks at you the way a mirror might, half curiosity, half recognition. You give him a look that's almost a smile, and he returns it before his master calls him inside. The irony is not lost on you. You, the executioner, walking past men who kill for a living, yet somehow it's you who carries the stain. At least the butcher's cuts feed someone. Yours only feed fear. Children are the boldest. They whisper and point when they think you're not looking. To them, you're half legend, half nightmare. The figure in the stories told to make them behave. Mind your manners, or the headsman will come for you. It's strange, being both real and mythic at the same time. You wonder if your father felt it too, that odd loneliness of being more symbol than man. You stop by the edge of the square, just before the scaffold comes into view. The crowd hasn't gathered yet. The wooden platform stands empty, waiting like a stage before the actors arrive. There's something almost peaceful about it. The ropes coiled nicely, the blocks set straight, the silence hovering over it all. You know it won't last. By noon, the air will be heavy with noise and sweat and expectation. But for now, it's quiet. And quiet, in your line of work, is sacred. You take a moment before stepping forward. You adjust the strap of your satchel, check the weight of the axe inside. Your fingers have already begun to ache from the morning cold, but you tell yourself it's nothing. The worst pains are always the ones that don't leave bruises. Someone passes behind you, a stable hand, whistling. He falls silent when he recognizes you, then nods quickly and walks on. You wait until he's gone before you let out a breath. That's how every morning goes. Short interactions, half conversations, polite avoidance. You used to resent it. Now it's just background noise. You step into the square. The cobblestones are slick underfoot, worn smooth by years of feet. Pilgrims, merchants, sinners, and you. The gallows looms at the far end, like a tree with no leaves, its beam dark against the pale sky. You don't look at it long. Not yet. This is your workplace, your office, your daily reminder that mercy here is just another word for efficiency. The town crier is already there, yawning, setting up his stool. He gives you a nod, not friendly, but familiar. The two of you share the same schedule, after all. Different duties, same hour. You lean against the post, adjusting the gloves on your hands. They're thick and worn, the fingertips gone shiny from years of use. You flex your fingers, stretch your shoulders, and stare at the clouds above. A few crows circle lazily overhead, black against gray. You envy their distance. Somewhere behind you, a bell tolls again, the signal that the trial has ended. The condemned will be brought soon. The day will begin in earnest. You glance once more at the axe in your bag, then at the empty platform ahead. For a moment, you feel nothing at all, not dread, not guilt, just a hollow sort of calm. It's the stillness that comes before a storm you've learned to accept. You shift your weight, steady your breathing, and wait. It's going to be a long day, but then again, for people like you, they all are.
By the time you reach the square, the quiet has dissolved. Word travels fast when death is scheduled. It always has. Merchants have abandoned their stalls for a better view. A baker's boy clutches a half bag of flour, white dust ghosting his sleeves. Even the dogs are excited, weaving through the crowd as though they know something's about to happen. The scaffold stands in the center, like a stage built by a particularly humorless carpenter. Wood darkened by weather, iron nails bent and hammered straight again, ropes coiled like sleeping snakes. Someone's taken the trouble to sweep the boards. It's a nice touch if you ignore the stains that never left. You set down your satchel and unpack your tools with the calm of someone laying out breakfast. Blade, block, rope, sawdust. Each has its place, and order is everything. A disorderly scaffold makes for ugly gossip, and gossip lasts longer than the condemned. The sheriff arrives first, puffed up like a rooster in borrowed authority. He greets you with that practiced solemnity officials use when they want to look merciful. You answer with a nod that says, "We both know why we're here, let's not pretend otherwise." Behind him comes the priest, eyes down, lips moving. You've seen him do this 100 times. The same verses, the same weary sigh at the end. He'll stand near the condemned, whisper comfort, promise redemption, and later pretend he doesn't remember your name. Then there's the crowd. Fishermen, farmers, mothers with children perched on their shoulders, faces hungry for the story they'll tell later over supper. They talk about justice the way other people talk about weather. Inevitable, occasionally inconvenient, but always worth watching. You can feel their eyes on you, weighing you like an exhibit. Some are curious, some are afraid. A few are openly fascinated, leaning forward with the bright, careless energy of people who haven't yet realized what they're about to see. You've learned to ignore the noise, the whispers, the little bursts of laughter that break out when someone spots you oiling the axe. People cope with discomfort in strange ways. Laughter is cheaper than compassion. The condemned hasn't arrived yet, but the crowd is already restless. A man in the front row sells roasted chestnuts. Another offers watered ale. You wonder, not for the first time, if this is what civilization really means, the ability to turn death into a day out. You check the blade again, more out of habit than need. The edge gleams faintly in the pale light. You think of how many times this ritual has repeated across towns just like this one, all claiming justice, all borrowing the same scaffold. Different names, same echoes. The sheriff clears his throat. The murmur dies down.
From the far end of the street comes the sound of chains, slow and rhythmic. The crowd parts like water before a boat. And there, between two guards, walks the reason you're employed. He's younger than you expected. They often are. Barefoot, shoulders bent, eyes darting toward the crowd but never meeting it. Behind him, the priest mutters prayers that barely reach above the sound of boots on stone. Every step forward is a confession. As they mount the platform, you step back to your corner. You become background, the quiet presence everyone pretends not to see until the moment they can't look away. The sheriff reads the charges, loud enough for the rooftops to hear. The words tumble out, legal and heavy, but to the condemned they might as well be birdsong. He's past understanding now. When the speech ends, the silence that follows feels too large for the square. Even the dogs stop moving. You meet the prisoner's eyes for the briefest heartbeat, that small human interval before duty erases everything else. You've seen courage, terror, denial, even relief. This one looks simply tired. You lift the axe, test its weight. The crowd leans forward as if pulled by a single breath. The priest whispers his last line. The sheriff nods. And the world holds still.
The square holds its breath. You can hear everything now. The rasp of rope against wood, the slow shuffle of the condemned's bare feet, the wet cough of someone in the crowd who's just realized this is not a story, but an event. Silence has a sound. It's heavy, waiting, almost reverent. The priest leans close to the prisoner, murmuring that last blessing in a voice meant to comfort, not to carry. You can't make out the words. You've stopped trying. They always end the same way. May God have mercy. Which is another way of saying, you won't. You step forward. You don't hurry. You've learned that haste makes the crowd nervous, and a nervous crowd turns cruel. You adjust the position of the block. You kneel, check the footing. The wood smells of salt and iron. Someone must have scrubbed it this morning. You almost want to thank them. From the corner of your eye, you catch a flicker of movement. Someone in the crowd clutching a rosary, another crossing themselves. It's strange how many people remember piety only when they're close enough to see blood. You straighten up and meet the sheriff's gaze. He gives a single nod, official approval, bureaucratic mercy. You nod back. It's the closest thing you get to fellowship. The condemned kneels. His breath fogs in the cold. For a heartbeat, you're both just men, existing in the same small space of air. You think about the mornings you've shared unknowingly, fetching water, buying bread, waiting for dawn. Then the thought is gone. You raise the axe. A few in the crowd turn away. Most do not. They came to see justice, and justice demands witnesses. You bring the blade down in one clean arc. It's not glory, not cruelty, just gravity and practice. The sound is nothing like the stories. It's duller, wetter, too human. You focus on the work, clean, efficient, dignified. You make sure the crowd sees no fumbling. You make sure the priest can keep his composure. You make sure the sheriff looks satisfied enough to dismiss you. It's theater, all of it, and you're the lead actor in a play no one applauds. For a moment afterward, there's that hush, shocked, electric. Then the murmurs begin, the collective exhale of a crowd released from responsibility. They'll go home and talk about how swift it was, how clean, how brave the condemned looked,
how calm the headsman seemed. They'll forget the smell by supper. You clean the blade with a rag, slow and methodical. It's important that people see that too. The ritual of tidiness, the illusion of control. You hand the axe to your assistant, who packs it back into its case. The priest finishes his prayer. The sheriff clears his throat again, already thinking about lunch. The crowd disperses in uneven waves. Some linger, as if hoping something else will happen. A boy points at the platform, wide-eyed. His mother drags him away by the arm, scolding him for staring. You watch them go and wonder how long it will take before the boy starts telling his own version of what he saw. Maybe tomorrow, he'll be a hero in his own retelling, close enough to touch the axe, brave enough to look. You don't mind. Stories are softer than truth. The priest passes you on his way down the steps. He mutters a blessing that sounds more like a formality. You nod anyway. It's easier than conversation. When the last of the onlookers have drifted away, you're alone with the aftermath. The scaffold is quiet again. The stains are fresh, the sawdust already doing its slow, humble work. You wipe your hands, fold the rag, and let out the breath you didn't realize you were holding. Every performance ends the same way, an empty stage and the sound of nothing. You stand there for a moment longer, staring at the space where a man used to be, and tell yourself this is order. This is duty. This is the price of civilization. Then you pick up the axe and climb down from the platform. There's more to do before the day is over.
Every executioner tells himself the same small lie. It won't happen to me. You sharpen carefully, you measure the height of the block, you test the weight of the blade. You treat each stroke like an equation, as if numbers could keep chaos away. But one day, the math fails. Sometimes it's the wood. Rain swells the grain, the block shifts under the blow, and the axe glances off with a sound that makes every stomach in the square twist. Sometimes it's the rope. New hemp, too green, stretching instead of snapping. You pull the lever, the body drops, and the crowd gasps when the condemned begins to twitch and kick, still alive, choking on the world's worst applause. And sometimes it's simply you. You're human. You misjudge the swing. You blink at the wrong instant. The blade finds bone, but not mercy, and the world erupts. The first time it happens, you freeze. You hear the noise rise, shock, then disgust, then something darker. You hear laughter too. There's always someone who laughs when they don't know what else to do. The sheriff looks at you like you've insulted the king himself. The priest forgets his prayers. The crowd surges closer, voices breaking apart into 100 versions of outrage. You swing again, until silence returns. Afterwards, there's no applause, no murmur of respect, only the sound of the rag as you wipe the blade and the taste of iron in the air. Someone spits near your feet. A woman crosses herself twice, whispering that the devil guided your hand. You don't argue. You can't. That night, the story travels faster than smoke. By sundown, every tavern knows the details. How you botched the job, how the condemned cursed you with his last breath, how God turned his face away. By morning, you're the villain. in a dozen retellings. You wake to find a chicken's heart nailed to your door, a village's idea of insurance against evil. Children run past your house shouting half-invented rhymes about dull axes and cursed hands. The market women won't take your coin unless you leave it on the ground for them to pick up later. You'd think people would be kinder. You spared no malice, you simply failed at precision. But failure for you isn't just a mistake. It's a spectacle that stains the entire village with the reminder that order is fragile. And so they give the blame a shape, a name, a face, yours. You keep working. You can't afford not to. The sheriff still needs you, though now he speaks with clipped words and never meets your eyes. The next time, you double-check every inch of rope, every inch of steel. You rehearse the motions in your head until you can hear the rhythm in your sleep. You imagine you can hear your father's voice, steady, tired, a clean-cut boy. They forgive clean cuts. Weeks pass. The gossip fades, replaced by newer misfortunes. A bad harvest, a priest's scandal, a merchant's theft. The village always needs something to talk about, and mercy takes the shape of distraction. But you remember, always. In the quiet moments before dawn, when you reach for the axe, your hands still hesitate a fraction too long. You tell yourself you've learned from it, and maybe you have. Still, every swing afterward feels a little heavier, a little more deliberate, as though the blade itself is waiting to see if you'll prove it wrong. The price of error is never just the dead. It's the part of you that dies with them.
The crowd always leaves first. They drift away in twos and threes, talking loudly, as if volume can scrub the sight from their minds. Mothers herd children toward home, merchants reopen shutters, the sheriff rides off to write his report. Within minutes, the square looks almost ordinary again. Almost. What's left behind is yours. You wait until the last stragglers are gone. Then you step back onto the platform, boots creaking against boards that are never dry enough. The smell hits first. Iron, ash, and that faint, unmistakable sweetness that no amount of sawdust will ever disguise. You've learned not to wrinkle your nose. You just breathe through your mouth and start the work. There's no ceremony to it. You gather the rope, coil it carefully. You wipe the block, sprinkle the sawdust, scrape it clean with a flat piece of wood. Every motion has its rhythm, its place. You could do it blindfolded. You sometimes wish you could. This is the part that never makes it into the chronicles. The scholars write about justice, about the moral order of kings and courts. They never mention the rag, the bucket, the endless stain. History forgets the man with the shovel. You tilt the bucket, pour a little sand over what the sawdust can't hide. The liquid darkens, spreads, then soaks in. In an hour, there will be only a dull patch on the boards. By tomorrow, even that will look like nothing. People will pass through the square, bargaining, gossiping, buying bread, never once glancing at the spot where a man's last breath vanished into the dirt. Down below, a few dogs linger. They know this routine too. You toss them a crust of old bread from your pocket to keep them busy.
Better they find that than the other things they might find. You finish packing your tools, the axe wrapped, the rope tied, the apron folded. The priest's gone, the sheriff's gone. There's no witness left now, just you and the sound of water dripping from the scaffold boards. The silence isn't peaceful, it's practical. The world has moved on, and you're still cleaning up the proof that it happened. You haul the bucket to the edge of the square, dump the mixture into the gutter, and rinse your hands in the trough. The water clouds red, then brown, then clear again. You watch it swirl away, down toward the river that feeds the town. Life continues in circles, you tell yourself. The same water that carries the stain will be ladled out later to bake bread, to brew ale, to baptize a child. You try not to think about that too long. When the work is finally done, you sit on the step beside the platform. The sun's higher now, bright and careless. You roll your shoulders, stretch the ache from your back. Your hands smell of oil and wood and something you can never quite name. If you close your eyes, you can still hear the echo of the crowd, clapping, murmuring, praying. You open them again before the memory hardens. There's no applause for cleanliness, no pay for the minutes you spend making the square respectable again, but you do it anyway, because someone must. Justice, like everything else in this world, depends on the people willing to do the parts no one wants to talk about. You stand, sling the satchel over your shoulder, and give the scaffold one last look. It stares back mute, patient, unbothered. Another day's work finished, another piece of order restored. By evening, the stage will be gone, the boards stacked behind the guardhouse, the rope hung to dry. The market will spill back over the same stones, laughter and bargaining, erasing the morning's gravity. And when people speak of today, they'll talk about how swift it was, how the sun shone, how justice was served. No one will mention the sawdust. You start walking, slow and steady, toward the edge of the square. The axe knocks softly against your hip with each step, the rhythm familiar, almost comforting. You tell yourself it's over for today. The lie tastes thin, but necessary.
Payment day comes wrapped in ceremony and silence. The crowd has gone, the scaffold has been swept, and now the sheriff must settle accounts with the man nobody invites to dinner. You find him in the magistrate's chamber, a small room that smells of candle wax and ink. He's seated behind a heavy desk, counting coins like they're tiny acts of virtue. The scribe sits nearby, quill scratching across parchment. You wait until they acknowledge you. They always make you wait a little longer than necessary. It's a ritual, their way of proving they can. Finally, the sheriff looks up. "Well done," he says, which isn't praise so much as a receipt. He opens a small pouch and pushes a few coins across the table. They clink once, dull and deliberate, and he pulls his hand back quickly, as if touching you might count as sin. You don't bother counting them here. You know better. It's always the same. A few silver pennies, maybe a bit of bread or meat as a gratuity, and the unspoken expectation that you'll disappear promptly. Sometimes they deduct firm materials, the rope, the sawdust, the nails. Sometimes they call it administrative fees. You never argue. Arguments lead to records, and records are the last thing an executioner needs. You pocket the coins, they're warm from the sheriff's hand, and you hate that you notice. The scribe clears his throat, makes a show of dipping the quill again. He murmurs as he writes, "Received payment for services rendered." You almost laugh at the phrasing. Services rendered, like a craftsman, a tailor, a man who fixes wagons.
But you stay quiet. The less you say, the fewer words they can twist later. Sometimes they offer wine. Today they don't. The priest left early, claiming other duties, and no one wants to drink with the headsman when the smell of iron still lingers in the room. You give the sheriff a small nod, and he returns it with that polite discomfort reserved for undertakers and tax collectors. He says, "Until next time." Not unkindly. You know there will be a next time. There always is. Outside, the sun has started its slow descent. You sit on the low stone wall by the gate and open your pouch. The coins gleam faintly, proof that society rewards even its shadows as long as they perform on schedule. You turn one over between your fingers, feeling the stamp of the king's face. His expression never changes. You've learned to envy that. Sometimes you imagine what it would be like to earn your money in daylight, hammering iron, plowing fields, baking bread. Honest work, as they call it. But honesty is a luxury, and luxuries don't keep a roof over your head. Besides, someone has to do this. Someone always will. You buy your supplies quickly. Flour, a bit of salt pork, oil for the blade. The butcher's wife doesn't meet your eyes, but she takes the coin. The blacksmith gives you a small nod that might even be respect or pity. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. At the tavern, the innkeeper pretends not to recognize you. He pours the ale without a word and sets it down with a careful space between your fingers and his. You drink in silence, aware of how the room folds around you. The talk grows quieter for a moment, then resumes, softer, like a river detouring around a rock. You finish the ale, leave the coin on the table, and walk out before the discomfort can solidify into courage. No one ever says thank you. You're not sure you'd want them to. Outside, the air smells of bread and smoke. The day is cooling, and the light has turned gold, the kind of beauty that makes ordinary people pause, sigh, and believe the world's not such a bad place after all. You stand in it for a moment, just long enough to feel the warmth on your face, before the wind changes and brings the faint scent of the scaffold back to you. Payment earned, duty done, reputation intact. Barely. You start toward home, the coins clinking softly in your pouch, a small bitter song that says, "You belong, but not with us."
If there is one thing you learn quickly in this trade, it's the art of existing in plain sight while being invisible. In a small medieval town, everyone knows everyone except you. They all know of you, of course, but that's different. You're the shadow in their stories, the one name they speak softer than the rest. You don't go to the tavern for company. You go because it's there, because sometimes you need the illusion of belonging. You take the same corner seat each time, the one near the door, back to the wall. From there, you can see everyone come and go. You listen to the gossip, the laughter, the clink of mugs, the small human noises of life continuing without you. People make room for you automatically. A bench clears itself when you approach, like magic. A jug of ale arrives without you having to ask, set down with a polite, trembling distance. The barmaid nods, but never smiles. The other patrons glance over just long enough to prove to themselves you're real, then look away before you catch them at it. You've grown used to the silence that follows your presence. It's not hostility, it's fear dressed in courtesy. They whisper after you leave, never before.
You prefer it that way. It's cleaner. Every once in a while, a stranger passes through the village. A merchant, a soldier, a pilgrim. They don't know who you are at first. They greet you like a normal man, maybe even share a drink, trade a few words about the weather or the road. For a few brief minutes, you almost forget. Then someone tells them. It happens every time. A quiet murmur, a pointed look, a single word. Executioner. And you see it happen in real time. The light leaving their eyes, the smile turning cautious, the hand that was resting comfortably on the table, inching back towards safety. Conversation dries up like spilled ale in the sun. They always find a reason to leave early. You've tried other places. Church, for instance. It's awkward. The priest means well, but the priest prays for your soul a little too loudly. And the people in the pews seem to scoot an inch further down the bench whenever you sit. They don't mean to be cruel. They just don't know where to look. You've thought about joining the fairs, the dances, the feast days. Once, years ago, you even did. You stood at the edge of the crowd, watching everyone spin and shout and drink. For a moment, you felt like maybe you could blend in, that if you just smiled enough, the distance would close. Then a drunk farmer spotted you, raised his mug and shouted, "To the man who keeps us honest." The laughter that followed wasn't kind. You left before the song ended. At the market, it's the same. You move from stall to stall, pretending not to see the way people part to let you through. The butcher's boy hands you your meat, wrapped twice in cloth, as if the extra layer might protect him from bad luck. The old woman who sells onions mutters a blessing under her breath each time she counts your coins. The blacksmith is polite enough to talk about weather and horseshoes, but never about his family. You don't hold it against them. Fear is a form of faith, and faith runs deep here. Besides, being avoided has its uses. No one cheats you in trade. No one steals from your house. No one knocks on your door after dark. There are worse kinds of loneliness. Still, every so often, you catch yourself longing for something simple. A hand on your shoulder, a shared joke, the sound of someone saying your name without a tremor in it. But those things belong to other people, the ones whose hands are clean and whose work doesn't echo through the square at noon. So you walk home alone, as you always do. Children stop playing when you pass. Dogs go quiet. Doors close softly behind you, not in anger, but in instinct. You don't take it personally anymore. You've become part of the village's design, the necessary absence, the empty space that keeps everything else symmetrical. At home, the silence welcomes you back like an old companion. The fire's low, the chair's where you left it. You sit, stretch your legs, and listen to the muffled hum of life outside, the laughter, the chatter, the faint music drifting from the tavern down the road. It's close enough to hear, but too far to join. That's your place in the order of things, the unseen margin between justice and comfort. You pour yourself a drink and raise it slightly, half a toast to no one. To another day survived, to the peace of being left alone, to the art of being invisible in plain sight.
Inside your house, silence has a pulse. It moves through the rafters and the walls, a steady hum that fills the space where conversation should be. You tell yourself it's peaceful, but you know better. Peace is something earned,
This is simply what's left over when no one dares to speak too loudly. Your wife moves quietly, always has. She learned long ago that life beside you is best lived like a shadow, present, careful, never in the way of anyone's line of sight. She was a widow when you met her, brave enough to risk a second reputation. For that alone you love her more than you know how to say. She loves you, in her way, but love here is practical. Meals, mended clothes, the small kindness of setting out water when you come home late. Words are dangerous in houses like yours. They linger too long and someone might overhear. Your children, 2 of them, both young enough to still believe the world might be fair, don't understand fully yet. They know what you do, of course. Everyone knows. The older one has started asking questions. The younger doesn't ask anything at all. He watches, listens, absorbs the pauses. Children can sense what's unsayable better than priests can. They play near the house, never in the square. When other children run past, there's that moment of hesitation, that subtle shift in the air. Your son lifts his hand to wave, and the others suddenly find something urgent to look at on the ground. Your daughter learns early that friendship is fragile. She hides her laughter now, keeps it small enough not to echo. You've told them the same thing your father told you. Hold your head high. Work is work. It sounds brave when you say it. It feels like a lie when you see how they flinch at whispers. At church, you sit near the back, always have. The priest's voice carries just fine from there. After the service, families file out quickly, nodding polite goodbyes. The little ones tug their parents' sleeves and whisper questions you can almost hear. Is that him? Yes, don't stare. They never mean harm. Fear is inherited here, passed down like land and superstition. Once, when your son was small, he came home from the well crying. A boy had thrown mud at him and called him the hangman's brat. You cleaned his face, told him that words can't bruise. He didn't believe you then, and you're not sure you believe it now. Your wife mends quietly by the fire while you sharpen the blade for tomorrow. The sound of stone against metal fills the room, steady and soft. She doesn't ask who it's for. You don't offer. That's the rhythm of your marriage, care without curiosity. Sometimes when the children are asleep, she touches your arm lightly, as though testing to see if you're still human beneath the leather and calluses. She never looks at your hands too long, neither do you. You keep a small garden behind the house, her doing. Parsley, onions, a few wild herbs. The neighbors don't like to trade produce with her, but she pretends not to notice. She grows things anyway. Maybe that's her defiance, to coax life out of ground everyone else treats like contagion. You've considered sending the children away when they're older, apprenticeships, convents, anywhere they can have a name that isn't yours. You know how this inheritance works. It clings, like smoke. Once the world knows what your father did, it never stops looking for it in you. And you've already seen it in them, the way people measure the distance between your children and themselves. A half step, a polite nod, the small, quiet cruelty of polite society. Your father once told you that an executioner's family lives in 2 worlds. Inside they are ordinary, outside they are contagion. He was right. You're both, and neither. Later, when the house grows dim and the fire collapses into embers, your wife will ask the only question she ever risks. Will it be busy tomorrow? You'll say, I hope not, and mean it. But hope isn't something your kind is paid to keep. You tighten the strap on the axe and set it against the wall, and listen to the quiet of your children breathing in their sleep. It's the only sound that reminds you what gentleness feels like. Outside, the village settles into evening. Somewhere beyond your door, people are laughing. The same people who cross the road tomorrow when they see your family coming. You tell yourself that's just how it is, that justice always costs something. But on nights like this, you wonder why it's always the innocent who end up paying the interest.
Market day is the only time your profession feels like a carnival attraction. By mid-morning, the square is unrecognizable rows of stalls, bursting with cloth, fruit, smoked fish, honey, gossip. The air hums with the kind of noise that only comes from people pretending everything's fine. You slip into the crowd because you have to. Food doesn't deliver itself to pariahs. You keep your hood low, your stride steady. People notice anyway. They always do. The conversations bend around you like wind around a stone. Still going, but altered. A woman who'd been haggling over cabbages goes silent as you pass. The merchant's hand hovers over the scale until you've gone 3 stalls away. It's not hostility exactly, it's choreography. Everyone knows their steps. You head first to the butcher. His shop smells of smoke and salt, and he greets you with a curt nod, same as always. The two of you understand each other. You both work in red. "Lamb today," he says, sliding a parcel across the counter. "Good cut." You set down your coin. He doesn't touch it directly. Instead, he reaches for the iron tongs that hang by the cash box and lifts the coin delicately, dropping it into the till with a metallic click. The tongs treatment. The village's polite way of saying your hands are unclean, but your money isn't. He's not the only one. The baker does it too, though he tries to make it look like a joke, grinning, saying, "You understand, old friend," as if humor softens the gesture. It doesn't. It just gives shame a smile to hide behind. You move through the stalls quickly, keeping your purchases small. Salt, oil, a bit of flour. The cloth seller pretends to search for change long enough for the next customer to step in line, rescuing her from the obligation of small talk. You let her. There's no use forcing conversation where it doesn't belong. At the far end of the square, a young girl sells apples from a basket. She's too new to know the rules. She smiles when you stop. "Penny apiece, sir." You hand her 2. Her father appears a moment later, face tight, eyes flicking between you and the coins in her palm. He snatches them, mutters an apology you didn't ask for, and gives her a small shake of the head. The smile disappears. Lesson learned. You walk on. This is what market day means for you. A list of errands performed with surgical precision. No lingering, no laughter, no warmth. Every interaction is a tiny negotiation between civility and superstition. You are tolerated, not accepted. Needed, not welcomed. It's a kind of arithmetic, the town's comfort balanced against your isolation. Everyone knows the sum. At the edge of the square, an old man selling candles nods to you. "Hard work," he says, voice low. You nod back. "Someone's got to do it," you reply. He shrugs. "Just glad it's not me." He means it kindly. You buy 2 candles not because you need them, but because he spoke to you like you were still a man. You finish your errands and start home, passing the churchyard on the way. There's a boy sitting on the wall, swinging his legs, watching you with the unfiltered curiosity of youth. "Is it true," he asks, "that you keep the heads?" You stop, look at him, consider the simplest answer. "No," you say, "they don't fit the shelves." He blinks, unsure if it's a joke. You walk away before he decides. The road home is quieter. Behind you, the market's noise fades to a distant hum. You can still feel the weight of eyes that followed you, half fear, half fascination. It used to sting. Now it just itches. A constant presence you scratch without thinking. You've become a mirror for the village's guilt. They project their darkness onto you, polish it until they can admire their own reflection in your exile. Back home, you unpack the day's purchases and set them neatly on the table. The butcher's parcel, the baker's loaf, the candles, the small jar of salt. They look ordinary, innocent. You almost smile at the thought these things, touched by so much superstition, sitting harmlessly in your kitchen. You pour yourself a drink and think about how the world manages to keep itself clean by pretending dirt belongs only to others. Outside, the bells ring again, calling the faithful to evening prayer. You don't go. Not because you don't believe, because you're tired of the way belief looks at you. The tongs have done their job. You've been handled, counted, kept at the proper distance. Justice remains unsullied, and dinner will be on time.
Once a week, or whenever superstition outweighs laziness, you decide it's time to bathe. You'd think a man who works with blood would be more committed to cleanliness, but bathing, in your world, isn't refreshment, it's penance. You start with the bucket. The pump behind the house groans, reluctant, coughing up water the color of pewter. It smells faintly of iron, which feels appropriate. You carry it inside, one bucket at a time, until you have enough to fill the small wooden tub that squats near the hearth like an obedient barrel. It leaks, of course. Everything leaks. You keep a rag under it to catch the slow drip of your dignity. You hang your apron and clothes by the fire, the leather stiff and dark, like a second skin that's finally been shed. Beneath the layers, you are paler than you remember, marked by old scars, calluses, and a faint shadow that soap never touches. People say dirt washes off. They're wrong. The kind that matters doesn't. You pour a little lye soap into the water, swirl it with your hand, and watch the bubbles rise like ghosts. You step in, slow, careful. The water bites. It always does. Cold at first, then hot enough to remind you what living feels like. You close your eyes. You could almost mistake the sound of water for silence. Bath dye isn't just about cleanliness, it's maintenance. You scrub until the skin stings, until the small cuts reopen. There's satisfaction in it, a perverse sort of order, as if the body can be purified through sheer abrasion. Your wife sometimes helps when she's in a gentle mood. She'll hand you a clean cloth, stand at a distance and talk about nothing. The garden, the weather, the new cobbler in town. You appreciate the effort. She never asks about work. She knows the stains she can't see are worse than the ones she can. When you're finished, the water looks like something unholy, gray, flecked with black, a mirror that refuses to reflect. You tip the tub over into the dirt outside. The water seeps into the ground, carrying your guilt with it, or so you like to imagine. The soil doesn't seem to mind. It's used to taking what no one else wants. You dry yourself with a rough cloth that used to be a shirt. The air feels different afterward, lighter, almost hopeful. For a few minutes, you allow yourself the fantasy that you've left something behind in that tub. Then you catch a glimpse of your hands, the nails clean, the skin raw, but still unmistakably what they are, tools. And just like that, the illusion fades. You sit by the hearth, hair damp, the last light of afternoon slanting through the shutters. The house smells of smoke, soap, and something faintly medicinal.
Your wife moves quietly in the corner, folding laundry. She glances at you once, gives a small nod, and says, "You look better." You thank her, though you both know better than to believe it. Bath day has its rituals beyond scrubbing. You sharpen the blade again afterward because a clean edge feels like balance restored. You oil the handle, check the rope, and repair a frayed strap on the satchel. These are your comforts, the small certainties of objects that do what they're told. You envy them for that. As night creeps closer, you look down at your hands one more time. The skin's pink from scrubbing, veins like blue cords beneath. You flex them, feeling the familiar pull of tendon and memory. The water might have carried away the dirt, but the weight remains. It always does. Outside, the last of the sunlight disappears. The fire crackles softly, and the world smells clean for once. Tomorrow it will smell like iron again. That's the part no one tells you about washing. It's never about being clean. It's about proving you tried. It always happens the same way. First, a rumor. Then, a crowd. Then the illusion of order collapsing in its own echo. You've seen it before. Justice losing its patience and turning into something else entirely. A thief too beloved, a witch too sympathetic, a nobleman's scandal that needs a scapegoat. The law hesitates. The people do not. And when the mob decides it's time, you find yourself caught in the space between duty and survival. It starts with noise, always noise. Shouts from the market, the clatter of boots on cobblestone, the frantic rhythm of something breaking that shouldn't. You step outside and see the current forming. Dozens of bodies, faces flushed, eyes wide, voices raised, words like witch, blasphemer, traitor spill through the air, hot and contagious. Anger moves faster than reason here. It's the only thing that does. They drag someone through the square. A woman, old, thin, hair wild. She's screaming not words, just sound. The crowd loves that part. It makes them feel justified. Behind them, the sheriff jogs to keep up, his authority melting like butter in fire. You stand still. You're supposed to wait for the signal, for paperwork, for the ritual of official sanction. But paperwork means nothing to a mob. They've already decided that law is too slow to be holy. You watch as they tie her hands, as someone brings a rope, as someone else lights a torch. The crowd swells, presses in. Faces blur into one another, fear and joy and hunger, all pretending to be righteousness. Someone spots you at the edge of the square. "There," they shout. "Let him do it. Let the headsman finish it proper." The roar that follows is worse than any silence. They start calling your name, not in respect, not even in hate, but in that awful tone reserved for tools. Use him. You shake your head, try to speak, but your voice is nothing against the storm. The sheriff turns toward you, relief flooding his face. "Do something," he says, as if justice were a bucket of water you could throw on a fire. You step forward because not stepping forward is worse. You don't want to touch the rope. You don't want to look at the woman. But if you don't, they'll do it themselves, and it'll be chaos instead of cruelty. You tell yourself that matters. You tell yourself that control is mercy. The crowd falls into an uneasy hush as you mount the platform. You can feel their breath, their heat, their trembling expectation. They want a spectacle, not a sentence. They want to see their own hands in yours and pretend it's justice. You raise your voice, steady but hollow. By order of the magistrate, you begin, even though no such order has been given. It doesn't matter. The words calm them, give them something to believe in. The sheriff nods quickly. The priest appears beside you, sweating, muttering a prayer that sounds more like an apology. You grip the rope and hate yourself for how familiar it feels. The woman's eyes find yours. They're not pleading. They're tired. You wish they'd plead. It would make what comes next easier. You do your job, not because it's right, not because it's fair, but because it's the only way to stop them from tearing her apart piece by piece. When it's over, the square is silent again. The crowd stares for a moment, then begins to disperse, satisfied. They murmur words like justice and order, as if repetition will make them true. Someone pats your shoulder on the way out, as though you've just fixed a broken fence. You stand there long after they've gone. The rope still sways in the evening wind, creaking softly. The smell of smoke and sweat lingers in the air, heavy as shame. You look down at your hands and feel the tremor begin, small at first, then stronger, until you have to sit to hide it. Later, when you walk home through the darkening streets, you see the same people lighting candles in their windows, praying for forgiveness. Maybe they think God only watched the last part. Maybe he looked away, just like you did. At home, your wife meets your eyes, but doesn't speak. She knows. Everyone knows. You wash your hands twice before touching anything. It doesn't help. The smell stays, the shaking stays, the sound of the crowd stays. That's the worst part of the job. The moments when the law and the mob become the same thing, and you realize you're the bridge between them. You hold that bridge, or everything burns. But sometimes, when the crowd cheers a little too loud, you can't tell which side of the fire you're on.
Night arrives like a confession. It doesn't fall so much as settle, heavy and deliberate, smothering the edges of everything you thought you recognized. The square is empty now. The gallows are only a darker shadow against the dark. The noise has gone, but echoes linger, tucked into corners where torches used to burn. You walk home by habit, boots finding the same ruts in the road, the same pools of mud. The air smells of smoke, wet straw, and the kind of silence that isn't peace. In another house, laughter drifts through a window, a fragment of some song. You slow down just enough to listen, not to envy it exactly, but to remember that it exists. Inside your own house, the fire has burned low. Your wife has left a bowl of stew on the table. It's cold now, the fat congealed, but you eat it anyway. Hunger is simple. It's the only feeling that still comes without guilt. The stew tastes of onions and quiet forgiveness. The children are asleep. You listen to them breathing through the thin wall, their small, even breaths, the only rhythm that still makes sense. You tell yourself that as long as they sleep soundly, the world hasn't entirely failed. You sit by the hearth and sharpen the axe again. It doesn't need sharpening. It's ritual, something to fill the air between thoughts. The scrape of metal on stone keeps ghosts at bay, at least for a while. Still, they come. They always do. You don't see them, exactly. You hear them first. A cough, a cry, a whispered please that isn't in any language you know. They don't accuse. They just hover, waiting for you to remember their faces. You try not to. Faces fade into silhouettes, silhouettes into numbers. That's survival. But sometimes one slips through. An old man with gray hair and gentle eyes. A girl who looked too young for the word sentence. The thief who thanked you for being quick. Memory is a cruel archivist. You've stopped going to the tavern at night. Ale doesn't dull anything anymore. It just makes the voices louder.
So you sit instead, listening to the house breathe, the timbers creaking, the faint scratch of a mouse somewhere in the wall. Every sound is a reminder that the world keeps going, even when you wish it would pause. Sleep doesn't come easily. When it does, it brings dreams that don't belong to you. The crowd's roar turns into wind, the platform into a forest, the axe into something weightless and endless. You wake drenched, heart hammering, unsure where you are for a moment. Then you see the faint glow of the coals and remember, still here, still breathing, still necessary. You get up, pace the floor, pour water into your hands, splash your face. The reflection that stares back from the basin is tired, hollow-eyed, older than its years. You study it the way you study the grain of wood before a cut, trying to predict how it will split. You whisper a prayer without words, not for forgiveness, but for forgetfulness. Sometimes you step outside, into the thin silver light of the moon. The village sleeps around you, roofs gleaming faintly, windows dark. You walk to the edge of the fields, where the grass whispers secrets to the night, and breathe. The air tastes cleaner here, farther from the square. For a few minutes you can pretend you're just another farmer checking the weather. The lie is almost convincing. You think of your father then, his hands, his voice, the way he used to stare at nothing for long stretches of time. You understand him now. The distance, the quiet, the way he'd flinch when you touched his shoulder. You used to think he didn't love you enough. Now you realize he was just trying not to break. When you finally return inside, the fire's out. You lie beside your wife, careful not to wake her, and stare at the ceiling. You can't see the stars from here, only the faint shimmer of moonlight through the shutters. You close your eyes, count the breaths between her heartbeats, and hope morning takes its time. You don't expect peace. Peace is for people who forget. You'd settle for sleep that doesn't come with a witness.
If there's one thing the Middle Ages teach you, it's that every curse comes with a loophole, even yours. For all the whispers, all the glances, all the doors that close a heartbeat too soon, your profession carries a few, let's call them benefits, bitter ones, half blessings carved out of necessity. The first is freedom from taxes. Technically, executioners are agents of the crown, public servants in the most literal, blood-stained sense, which means you don't pay tithes to the church or dues to the guilds. At first, that sounds impressive. People complain about taxes all the time. But when you realize it also means the church doesn't want your prayers and the guilds don't want your membership, it feels less like privilege and more like exile disguised as efficiency. You also have the right to keep the clothes of the condemned. They call it a fringe benefit. You call it what it is, charity by corpse. On a good day, that means a coat without holes, or a pair of boots that almost fit. On a bad day, it's rags soaked through with someone else's fear. You wash them, hang them by the fire, pretend they're just fabric. They never quite smell clean. Then there's the law itself. Technically, you answered to no local magistrate. You can't be tried in the same court as ordinary men, something about conflicts of interest. It sounds grand, until you realize it means no one wants the responsibility of judging you. When you commit a sin, it's not called a crime. It's called an unfortunate circumstance. The irony doesn't escape you. You, the keeper of justice, existing permanently just outside of it. There are smaller perks, too. At fairs, no one charges you at the gate. Not out of kindness, they simply assume you're there on business. When the soldiers come recruiting, they pass over your house. When the plague comes, people don't knock, even to beg for help. Fear, you've learned, is the best quarantine. Once in a while, someone tries to be brave about it. They'll nod to you in the street, maybe even say, "Hard work, that," or
Someone's got to do it. It's meant as respect, but it feels like absolution they're giving themselves. They want to believe you're proud of what you do so they don't have to feel guilty for needing you to do it. There's also a strange kind of safety. No one robs your house. No one cheats you in trade. You could leave a coin purse on your doorstep and it would still be there in the morning. Not because they're honest, because they think you're cursed. Protection by revulsion. You take it. A shield's a shield, even when it's made of superstition. You've even had suitors, parents who would marry their daughters into your family for the security. They say, "It's stable work," trying not to choke on the words. They come with gifts, always wrapped carefully, as though the paper itself were holy enough to ward off contamination. Most of them don't stay long enough to drink the ale you offer. You've stopped being offended by that too. There are nights when you catch yourself laughing at the absurdity of it all. How you can be the most powerful man in the village and the most untouchable one at the same time. How people can thank you for your service in the morning and refuse to touch your hand by evening. How justice, in its purest form, looks a lot like isolation. Sometimes you think about leaving, vanishing into another town, starting again under a different name. But the joke's on you. Executioners don't travel. The job follows. Word spreads faster than any man can walk. You can change your name, your tools, your story, but not the smell. The smell clings to the soul. And so you stay. You count your strange blessings. The roof doesn't leak too badly. The bread is steady. The fire holds through winter. No one dares harm you. The world leaves you alone. But loneliness, it turns out, is the one tax even the king can't forgive. You sit at the window, watching the night stretch itself across the fields. Somewhere far away you can hear laughter, a wedding feast maybe. You wonder if the bride knows that her dowry once came from a man whose clothes you folded and sold. You think of all these ironies, all these odd comforts, and you smile. Not because it's funny, but because it's the only expression that doesn't break something inside you. In the ledger of life, every line has a cost. Yours is just written in red.
Not immediately. Of course, your name will linger for a generation or two, muttered in doorways, whispered as a warning. Don't cross him, don't end up like the headsman's mark. But eventually, like all necessary evils, you'll fade into background noise. History doesn't have room for men like you. You do the work, and then the work eats your name. The historians will remember the criminals, the kings, the laws, the verdicts. You'll be a footnote. The sentence was carried out by the appointed executioner. No name, no detail, just carried out, as though justice performed itself. You'll be erased by phrasing, scrubbed clean by syntax. There's a kind of poetry in that. You've spent your life cleaning up other people's sins, and now history will do the same to you. You vanish, neatly, professionally, one final act of efficiency. You sometimes wonder what people will think, centuries from now, when they hear the word executioner. Will they picture a monster, a brute, some faceless man in a hood swinging wildly for coin? Or will they understand the smaller truth, that you were just another cog in the machinery of fear and order, trying to sleep at night like everyone else? You doubt it. The world loves villains more than functionaries. Monsters make better stories than maintenance workers. You imagine your tools outliving you. The axe, perhaps, ending up in a museum centuries later, polished, mounted, admired under glass by people who mistake it for romance. They'll lean close and whisper about how grim and fascinating the past was, not realizing they're staring at a mirror. Human cruelty never goes out of style. It just upgrades its wardrobe. Maybe someone will even write a song about you, a ballad sung by drunks who never met you, about the dark-hearted hangman of old. They'll give you a scar you never had, a laugh you never made, a soul you never sold. And somewhere, if ghosts have humor, you'll laugh too, because for once, they'll be paying attention. Your children won't keep the trade if you have anything to say about it. You've already started steering your son toward the blacksmith, your daughter toward the convent. You'd rather they be poor and clean than comfortable and feared. The world doesn't need another you. It just thinks it does. You've met other executioners on the road or at trials in bigger towns. They all look the same, quiet, watchful men with a certain stillness behind the eyes. You talk like veterans at a war no one believes in, comparing scars, comparing ways to live with yourself. None of you brag. There's nothing to brag about, but there's a silent brotherhood in that, an understanding that no one else can afford to share. You've also seen what happens when that stillness breaks. The ones who drink too much, talk too loud, try too hard to convince themselves they're righteous. They don't last long. Their hands start shaking. The axe slips. One mistake, one bad swing, and the crowd turns on them. You've learned to stay quiet, precise, invisible. The less you exist, the longer you survive. Sometimes, though, just sometimes, you catch yourself imagining how you'll die. Not dramatically, not on a scaffold, probably in your chair, by the fire, midwinter, a mug in your hand, and your name on no one's lips. And that feels right. Anonymous men deserve anonymous endings. The village will nod, say, "He did his duty," and move on to the next one. You think of the priest's words, the ones he mutters before every execution. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. You've always found it ironic. You've remembered nothing else your whole life. But here's the twist they never mention. When death finally comes for you, you'll greet him like an old coworker. You've spent years introducing him to others. It's only polite he returns the courtesy. You imagine him knocking politely, stepping inside, hanging up his cloak before saying, "Your shift's over." And for once, you might actually rest. History won't write your name, but that's fine. You've carved enough of it into the world already, into the wood of the scaffold, the grain of the block, the silence that follows the crowd. That's legacy enough.
The last night always begins like any other. That's the trick of it. The fire burns the same, the stew tastes the same. The world keeps its ordinary face right until it decides not to. You wake in the middle of the night to silence that's too heavy, as if even the wind's holding its breath. The coals in the hearth glow faintly, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. You sit up, the old ache in your shoulders whispering its usual complaint. There's no sound but the creak of the rafters and the soft rustle of your wife turning in her sleep. It's not fear that wakes you, it's habit, the same instinct that's kept you alive all these years, the same reflex that listens for footsteps, for whispers outside the window, for the next sentence to be handed down. But tonight, there's nothing. Just stillness so deep it feels rehearsed. You dress quietly, boots, shirt, cloak. The motions so familiar they're more reflex than choice. You light a candle and sit by the table. The tools are there, as always. The axe, oiled and ready, the rope coiled neat. You don't remember laying them out. Maybe you did earlier. Maybe you didn't. They have a way of appearing when the mind drifts too close to the end of something. You pour a little ale, take a sip,
and let your thoughts wander. You think about the first time, the first execution years ago, how you couldn't eat for 2 days after, how your hand shook so badly the priest thought you were possessed, and how over time the trembling stopped, not because it got easier, but because there was no room left for reaction. You simply ran out of places to put it. You think about all the faces you've forgotten and the ones that refuse to leave. The old man who thanked you for being kind. The woman who looked you in the eye right before the drop and said, "We'll see each other again." The boy who didn't fight, who whispered his mother's name all the way up the steps. You remember telling yourself that mercy is in the wrist, not the heart. You tried to believe that. The candle burns lower. Wax pools around the base, soft and slow. Outside, a dog barks once, then stops. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls. Just one note, long and uncertain. You close your eyes and let it fade. You picture the scaffold as it stands now. Empty, patient, waiting. You've always admired its honesty. No pretense, no hypocrisy, just wood and rope and inevitability. It never lies about its purpose. You wish you could say the same for the people who build it. You think of your children, grown now, scattered like seeds on wind. They don't write much. That's fine. You told them not to. Better for them to carry clean names than a stained one. You hope they're sleeping well tonight, unaware that the silence here has weight. The air grows colder. The candle gutters. You pull your cloak tighter and stare at the axe. Funny thing, you used to think it belonged to you, but looking at it now, you realize it never did. You were just its keeper, its courier. The steel serves no man. It just waits for hands. Always will. You smile. Just a little. Not the proud kind, not the bitter kind. Just the small, tired curve of a man who understands the joke at last. Justice, mercy, guilt, they're all temporary. Steel and silence are forever. You stand, stretch, and step outside. The moon hangs low, a pale coin over the fields. The air smells of frost and wood smoke. The town sleeps, behind you, oblivious. You walk to the edge of the square, to the platform that's both cradle and tomb for your life's work. You rest your hand on the wood. It's cold, smooth in places, rough in others, like memory itself. This is where you've lived, really. Not in your house, not in your skin, but here, in the gap between judgment and forgiveness. You whisper, "It's done," though you're not sure who you're saying it to. The wind answers softly, carrying with it the faintest echo of applause. Not mockery, not approval, just the sound of people who once needed you and have already forgotten your name. You look up one last time at the stars, wondering if they've watched every swing, every drop, every prayer cut short in mid-word. They don't blink. They never have. And for the first time, you don't ask for forgiveness. You just hope the next man who takes your place remembers to be quick, to be quiet, and to look away when he has to. You leave the scaffold as the candle in your house flickers out. The square swallows your shadow. The night, indifferent as ever, closes behind you. Somewhere in the distance, morning begins. Thin, gray, seeping through shutters that never quite close. And the world, mercifully, forgets you.
So, next time you complain about your job, about long hours, low pay, or your boss breathing down your neck, remember this guy. He didn't get weekends. He didn't get applause. He got a shovel, a stain that never washed out, and the world's most awkward thank you. He was the janitor of morality, the middleman between sin and paperwork. And when history moved on, it didn't even leave him a footnote, just a faint red thumbprint in the margins. It's easy to judge him now from the clean comfort of our screens, but the truth is, the medieval executioner wasn't evil. He was employed. Someone had to keep the wheels turning. Someone had to do the dirty work so everyone else could keep pretending their hands were clean. Sound familiar? We like to think we've outgrown people like him, but if you squint, if you look at modern justice, media, outrage, you might still spot his shadow, quietly doing the same old job. Only now, the axe is made of headlines, and the crowd still wants a show. So, if you've enjoyed this little walk through the darker corners of history, if you laughed, cringed, or felt just a bit too seen, do what the medieval crowd never could. Show mercy. Click subscribe. You'll live longer than he did.